Hello, and thank you for taking the time out to listen to my presentation, and I hope that you enjoy. So, when diversity comes to mind, we immediately think about what we actually see, such as someone's skin color, their gender, their body size, or even their physical abilities. Diversity is much more than the clearly visible parameters of race, age, and gender. This is what we call visible diversity. What we do not always think about is an individual's education, their ethnicity, their values, their work background, even their communication style, as well as where they're from. And ultimately, it is the diversity of perspective and thought that will benefit the organization. As mentioned before, diversity is not what we think, but it's how we think. Why is this a challenge for leaders? It introduces greater complexities. It requires a leader to think different. Diversity of thought challenges leaders to rethink conflict, shifting their perspectives away from mitigating conflicts' negative effects and towards designing conflict that can push their teams to a new level of creativity and productivity. Efficiency and productivity is challenged when leaders are not able to capitalize on the talents of their teams. So while we usually define diversity by what we see, race, gender, age, etc., we oftentimes miss the diversity of thought. As you can see here, diversity of thought can be defined in many different ways. And what I would like for you to take away here is that in order to yield different ideas, leaders have to lead different people in the organization. Having different thoughts and opinions based on individuals' background and experiences facilitates a culture of creativity and innovation. And this is what yields organizational success. Diversity of thought goes beyond the affirmation of equality, simply recognizing differences and responding to them. Instead, the focus is on realizing the full potential of people, and in turn, the organization acknowledging and appreciating the potential promise of each person's unique perspectives and different way of thinking. This is what our organizations need, and it takes a good leader to understand this concept. So, on the next slide, there is a video, and maybe hopefully this can kind of give you a better understanding of the concept or challenge of diversity of thought.
There is no one else in the world exactly like you. Everything from the books you read, the movies you watch, the places you visit, the people you meet, the work that you do, basically everything that you experience in life influences and determines the kind of thoughts and ideas that you produce. And although your ideas may be good, who knows how great they could become once they've had a chance to mingle and develop with good ideas from other people. That's the magic called diversity of thought. There's always more than one way to think about and accomplish something. Groups that encourage diversity of thought often achieve amazing, innovative breakthroughs. On the other end of the spectrum, you have groups that just follow the status quo and thrive on what's called groupthink. That's like when someone says, I think Justin Bieber will be the perfect guy to play the next James Bond, and everyone else agrees. Right. So, to avoid that kind of craziness where you work, here's what you need to do. Practice courage by bringing your ideas to the table. Listen and try to understand different points of views. Focus on the problem solving and not the personalities. Celebrate your uniqueness and that of everyone else you work with.
When diversity of thought is not considered, it can certainly impact the organization at many different levels. Creativity is challenged. Every person in an organization has something to offer. However, as a leader, if you do not build your workforce or teams with people who are different, then you will be doing the same thing the same way all the time. Facilitation of more conventional thinking or groupthink is another example. So think about the teams of people we lead. Are there times when you feel like you're leading yourself? I know I feel like that sometimes because I'm a facilitator for a nurse education work group at my job. And my role as a facilitator is to provide support to the group. It's made up of, or the group's made up of unit nurse educators and a group leader, which is not me, it's a nurse. The purpose of the work group is to develop processes for streamlining the dissemination of nurse education simply because we do not have a nurse education department. And I have to say, I love these nurses with all my heart, but I do not look forward to the meeting every month. Every time, or just about every meeting, everyone sits around and waits for me to talk, even after I've explained to them over and over that this is their meeting. And the suggestions that I provide, you know, I never get any feedback except for nods of heads or people making comments saying, that sounds great, sounds good to me. And yes, while sometimes I might have a good idea, I always try to make it known that they have even better ideas because they're actually working on the front line as nurse educators. So, heck, I've struggled with this a lot, and our group is actually working on trying to diversify our group, basically bringing in different disciplines to kind of just stimulate a different thought process. And so I thought this was a really good example of how if we don't have that culture of diversity of thought, thinking about bringing in different people with different backgrounds and different expertise, then we can kind of just not even really get anywhere. And there's always one person making all the decisions. Another thing I wanted to add is that there are also times when there are two or three people with strong personalities who dominate their groups with ideas. That wasn't me, but I don't have a strong personality. But in these situations, others in the groups are oftentimes hesitant about speaking up because maybe they feel like their idea will get shot down or, somebody will have something sarcastic to say or they're ignored. And sometimes this phenomenon is referred to as groupthink, which I'll talk a little bit about later. And varying types of thinkers. So it's important to have varying types of thinkers in our groups, in our organizations to help guard against this concept of group thinking. And then limiting optimization of diverse skill set is another impact that can be made on the organization as a result of a lack of diversity of thought culture. For a long time, in my job in the cath lab, we required our technologists and our nurses in the procedure rooms to function in all three roles. So that's a monitor, a circulator, and a scrub. And this worked really good at our larger hospital facility. But when we started opening up cath labs at our smaller facilities, we saw that this process, this standard, really hurt the smaller areas or the smaller facilities. We found that it impacted how we care for our patients. It caused significant apprehension amongst those who were trained in one role, especially those that have been hired recently. It created significant workflow inefficiencies, and it impacted our orientation. And so we were able to, or basically in this situation, we were making everyone become an expert in everything, and was not able to really capitalize on their individual skill set that they truly brought to the team. So our team actually just last few months we've kind of reorganized at our smaller facilities how we orient our staff, and we've actually are trialing a new process or new standard where if you don't have to circulate, if you don't have to learn the circulation role, you don't have to learn the recording role or the scrub role. We're realizing that they're experts in different areas and we're really capitalizing on that. And that's, we've actually gotten really good feedback. So that's a great example, I thought. So I looked at two theories that support the leadership style and actions as it relates to the challenge of diversity of thought. The first one is contingency theory, And this is one of the theories that relates most closely to leadership diversity. This theory suggests that the uniqueness of individuals helps shape a leader's approach towards that individual in order to achieve the common goal. It also relates to diversity in more than one way. There is an aspect of realism associated with the changing demographics, such as aging nurses, increasing Gen Xers, second career nurses, education background, and just the overall nursing shortage. And that is impacting our healthcare organization. In addition, among leaders, there is an issue of pragmatism associated with being competitive and successful in targeting an increasingly diverse market and selecting the type of individuals who can contribute to the organizational success in this changing environment. Transformational leadership is another theoretical foundation for supporting the leader as it relates to diversity of thought. Transformational leadership is more than a simple social exchange process between a leader and a follower. It is actually an established emotional bond between the leader and follower, and it engages the full person of the follower, including the higher order needs, and thus enables him or her to perform beyond expectations. Transformational leaders also act as role models and is responsible for bringing out the talents and unique abilities of their followers so that they can be empowered through their own motivation and stimulation. This transformational experience creates a culture of trust, creativity, and innovation, eventually yielding organizational outcomes. So there is a great deal of broad or a great deal of evidence out there on diversity, obviously, but I was able to find some that was specific to the concept of diversity of thought. And so the first article I looked at was an article titled "Managing the New Global Workforce, Fostering Diversity and Forging Consistency." And this particular author really wanted to convey that in order to facilitate diversity of thought, there needs to be a diversity in behaviors of leaders, as this is the stimulus for creativity and innovation. So, in his article, he talked about actions such as career development and ongoing training, especially in communication and collaboration between leader and follower, both ways. So, diversity in teams, as he puts it, facilitates good change. The next two articles, the first one was titled "Turn Diversity to Your Advantage," and this emphasized on key business drivers for achieving workplace diversity. There were these were enhancing a broader talent pool, improving innovation, stronger relationships with customers, improving productivity, and increasing agility. Agility references or agility, basically, in what he was mentioning, means when organizations adapt and respond to different types of people and that they adapt more readily to changing work culture. This second article was titled "Managing Workforce Diversity as an Essential Resource for Improving Organizational Performance." This supported many of the actions that we'll talk about a little bit later, in particular hiring and recruitment, and that leaders can take in order to address the diversity of thought challenge. One thing that I appreciated in this article was the importance of leadership accountability in meeting diversity goals. And this statement resonated with me because truly this is what drives our leaders to the point of making diversity as a priority. These are the last two articles. One of the downfalls to not practicing diversity of thought is that it creates groupthink. And this is what Neck and Mance described in their article titled "From Groupthink to Teamthink." According to Neck and Mance, groupthink is a mode of thinking that people engage in when they're deeply involved in a cohesive in-group. Members striving for unanimity override their motivation to realistically appraise alternative course of action. A deterioration of mental efficiency, reality testing, and moral judgment that results from in-group pressures. Groupthink results in poor quality decisions and group decision making processes. The Winston article titled The Importance of Leadership Diversity, the relationship between diversity and organizational success in the academic environment, again pointed out leaders' roles in recruitment and hiring of diverse individuals. It, in this article, he highlighted theories that support leadership diversity and emphasized on selecting the right diverse individuals for the job. So here is where we will begin to identify what type of plan or what type of actions a leader can take in order to implement a culture of diversity of thought. So when it comes to implementing a diversity of thought culture, leaders have to first acknowledge that there is a challenge and that the leader or organization is ready to address this change. Organizations have to devote a lot of money, which includes extensive training, education, hiring consultants, restructuring talent management, so on and so forth. An effort to become more inclusive and create a diverse workforce where everyone's skill set and unique abilities are recognized and valued, and where purpose is achieved through leveraging diversity. So, first, you have to acknowledge that this is a challenge and that you're ready. As a leader, you should first assess everyone on your team, whether that is a group of individuals from a nursing unit, an administrative team, an ambulatory setting, or human resource team, and identify their unique assets. This is a way for leaders to identify the right employees who can best address their most pressing problems. So you might want to ask yourself, who is the creative thinker on your team, or maybe who is mathematically inclined, or even who articulates well on the team. Strong managers know which skills their employees have and use that knowledge to assign work that plays to specific employees' strengths. A second action is hiring the unconventional candidate. Hiring the unconventional candidate is another action to take to implement diversity of thought. Take a situation where there are two positions open and the leader interviews three people. All the candidates were asked the same questions. And let's just say Jeff answered correctly 7 out of 10, Rose answered correctly 6 out of 10, and Spencer answered correctly 5 out of 10. Now, many leaders would have immediately chosen Jeff and Rose because of two things. They scored the highest, and sometimes HR spends a lot of time and money making sure that people that they hire all think the same. And one of the authors in this particular article talked about how HR is customized to a certain formation, valuing consistency and efficiency over individual flair. What the leaders in HR fail to notice in these scenarios above is that the lowest score correctly answered questions that the highest scores incorrectly answered. As such, Spencer presumably brings a different way of thinking to the organization. Now, Spencer is the one that scored 5 out of 10. With an eye for thought diversity, leaders can select people who think differently or who might be outside the traditional box or unconventional while still maintaining the alignment of their organizational goals. Looking at this third action, as leaders, I am sure that many of us do presentations and obviously lead meetings in our organizations when we're trying to get buy-in or change a process. At the end of our presentations, usually the first thing we will say is, "What do you think?" And this type of question is pretty much a death sentence for diversity of thought. It is too broad and oftentimes ambiguous, leaving our followers thinking and wondering what we want to hear. Instead, as leaders, we should be more clear and specific with our questions when we're seeking out feedback. So rather asking people what they think, maybe ask what part of the presentation did you like the least, or what part was concerning. The next action is for leaders to encourage reverse mentoring. Our workforce comprises of many different generational makeups: millennials, Gen Xers, baby boomers, and even some traditionalists. But are we really truly able to get anything done? Does racing to beat the other the healthiest way to drive creativity and innovation in an organization? No. One thing that I see today is one generation trying to race another. With new technologies being introduced, it is common to see the younger workers adapting quicker than the more seasoned workers. What leaders can do in this situation is encourage a culture where younger workers can help the more seasoned workers and vice versa, where all can feel like their ideas are valued and provides a fresh perspective. And finally, a leader should create a culture that is open to ideas. People bring different cultures, backgrounds, and personalities to the table, and those differences shape how we think. If individuals do not feel comfortable with being themselves in the office or at a staff meeting, then their varied ideas and thought processes won't come to the forefront. Leaders also have to be open to suggestions. Some leaders already have their minds made up about things, and when they hear others, they become closed minded. To me, this is the most important action. If we cannot facilitate a culture of trust, open mindedness, then we're destroying the very thing we're trying to create here. All right, thank you so much for listening to this presentation. If you have any questions or suggestions or feedback, please let me know. Thank you so much. Here are my references for that I used for this presentation, and here's some more. Thank you.